Hey, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of the Find Out podcast here on YouTube Live. I am here with Richard von Glahn, the Executive Director of People.Politicians Missouri. Richard, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
There's obviously been a lot of conversation around gerrymandering across the country. Obviously, that started with Texas trying to essentially steal 5 seats, which it looks like they're going to succeed at. Then California went and put a ballot initiative up, actually, and which passed overwhelming to basically zero out their gains. But I think what a lot of people have not realized is that there have been fights across the country, and Missouri is one of those states. So, Richard, could you tell us a little bit, just the background of what exactly Republicans have been trying to do with gerrymandering this year?
Yeah, so Missouri has, in our Constitution, a once-a-decade redistricting process. And so this is the first time that we've ever seen politicians try to engage in a mid-decade redistrict. And, they were told to do so. Initially, people sort of said, no, that's not what we do here. But then they were told to do so again, and they complied, and they moved it forward. The important thing about Missouri is also a state that has a referendum right, the ability for citizens to functionally act as a veto on any act of the General Assembly. And it's not an easy process, but we had 90 days to gather about 107,000 signatures to put the issue to the ballot beginning September 12th. Those 90 days finished last week. We turned in over 305,000 signatures, so nearly triple what we needed to. And at this point, the law is suspended, and people get to be the final deciders of this. And that's an exciting achievement for us. A lot of people, I think, look at the Missouri legislature and say, "Oh, well, Missouri's a red state," but this is going to be a "quote unquote" red state where the people of that state fight back against this political power grab and, protect our representation in our
and I think that you make a really good point. I think it's worth it for people to know that you have this ability to basically petition to stop or push forward legislation. And I think last year, correct me if I'm wrong, was there a minimum wage increase on the ballot, and then also reproductive health, making sure that abortion was safe and legal in the state, I believe. And did both of those pass? Yeah,
correct. There's the reproductive freedom abortion right that overturned a state complete ban on abortion. That passed with over 52% of the vote. And then I actually ran a minimum wage and paid sick days initiative, which received nearly 58% of the vote, more votes than Josh Hawley, who got elected U.S. Senator. So, there tends to be a group of voters in Missouri who, when they look at these issues and think about, would this benefit me, tend to vote that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I still want to know who the Donald Trump, Josh Hawley, also pro-choice / increase the minimum wage folks are, but clearly there are a lot of them, and I think we'll probably see the same thing here, where I think, and getting 3 times the amount of signatures you needed to get that on the ballot suggests to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that people in Missouri actually do not want this gerrymander to go through, and that actually it would remove.
Yeah.
Is it 1 seat we're talking about, or is it 2?
It is 1. I mean, Missouri is frankly already a gerrymandered state. We've got 8 seats, 6 are held by Republicans, 2 are held by Democrats. So you think 25% of the voice is coming from Democrats in a state that reliably votes about 42% for the Democrats. So we're a gerrymandered state to begin with, but then this would further gerrymander us. And those voters exist everywhere. I mean, one of my favorite photos of this campaign is a young man, wearing a MAGA shirt, Trump,
24.
What it was 2024, signing the petition. And, he was saying to us, he's like, politicians need to follow the rules. I said, yeah, we agree. So let's do that.
And that's it's really interesting to see folks like that, because this actually did come from Donald Trump, obviously, because he realized that the policies that he and the GOP have in place at the national level, including removing those ACA tax credits, which I'm sure are going to dangerously affect people in Missouri who either their healthcare premiums are going to go up 2 or 3-fold, or frankly lose their health insurance completely. Would rely on those Democratic votes being in the majority at a certain point in order to either bring them back next year, because it looks like the Republicans are just going to torch them. Like, how critical is that one Democratic seat, both for Missouri and the country?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazingly critical. You think of how tight the House of Representatives is, and who are control in different committees, and what bills get prioritized and what don't. It's just a critically important seat. And as you mentioned, I mean, there's a lot of hardworking folks in Missouri who are getting hammered by the impacts of tariffs. A lot of our farmers are really suffering. We have a lot of hardworking people, as you mentioned. The cuts to the ACA, put a lot of our hospitals in real jeopardy, particularly our rural hospitals. Missouri is a Medicaid expansion state. It is a state where actually we did that via ballot initiative. So all of these policies have a huge impact, and I think that's why you see so many Missourians flocked to this campaign. I mean, we had more volunteers than I've ever seen. Over 2,000 people got trained to go out, talk to their neighbors about what's happening, get their signatures, do the pieces, because people know what's at stake here.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, 300,000. When you said you needed to get about 110, was that what you said you needed, roughly somewhere around there? I mean, it just shows that the anger across the country, including in deeply red states like Missouri. I mean, I know 20 years ago we used to, it used to be a bellwether, but it's pretty red. And I was on the 08 Obama campaign, and we were like, we almost won. But I think it just shows how upset people are with the direction of this country, which then also affects these red states. You mentioned farmers who are getting just absolutely destroyed by these tariffs, and the fact that rural hospitals will be closing, nursing homes will be closing, and these people don't have any place to go. So it's really a testament to your work, but also a signal, I think, to Republicans that 300,000 Missourians signed this, which is a massive number. And now and I assume you obviously mentioned the Trump voter. Like, generally speaking, when your folks talked to Republicans, were they generally favorable with what you were trying to do, or was it a mix? I'm just curious, because we're all talking about Donald Trump's numbers being in the 30s. That has to translate it into a lower number in red states as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think people don't like politicians prioritizing themselves and grabbing power for themselves, and they understood that that's what gerrymandering is. There's a simple concept here. Either voters get to pick our politicians, or politicians pick their voters. And no one wants to be a political pawn, even if you're being used as a pawn by the party that you support. The fact that they would use you like a pawn still angers and upsets people. And so that's why, I think this has been a slam dunk issue for us. Talking to
and then you said, there was a bit of I don't know if funny business is the right term, but when you delivered and I saw a photo, I believe, of the boxes and boxes of petition signatures. The Republicans in the state were not particularly enthralled with what you brought them. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The Attorney General actually sought an injunction against us from being able to turn in signatures, and their position was that they conveyed to a federal judge, if people, not politicians, is allowed to turn in signatures, the map's not going to be allowed to go into effect. They said, this is the harm that we're going to face. And they cited a section of the Missouri Constitution that is true. I mean, that they were correct. But a Trump-appointed judge rejected their position on the night of Monday, December 8th. About 12 hours later, we rolled into Jefferson City with 4 U-Hauls and 691 boxes containing 305,000 signatures, and we turned them in. And there's a certain point that I think the Secretary of State looked at this and said, these guys are clearly going to succeed in doing the exact thing that we said that they were going to succeed at, which is keeping this map from going into effect. And they then took a complete 180 on their position and are now claiming that this map's going to go into effect anyway, while they dither and worry about counting the signatures and doing the different points. And that is, that just goes against about 115 years of court precedent. The Missouri Supreme Court's ruled on this on 3 different occasions. And they're just wrong. But this is where they go on really sort of grasping at straws. And all of that feeds the narrative of desperate politicians trying to grab power. I mean, everything they do proves our point as to why.
Well, and that's exactly why across the country we're seeing this. And Donald Trump literally saying, find me 5 votes, which is very similar to what he said in Georgia, which got him in a lot of hot water of trying to find 12,000 votes, which was illegal and didn't exist. But so what is the next step then? So obviously, have they sued to push it, or do you have to sue to stop them from implementing? What's the next? What happens here?
Yeah, it's a little confusing always because our attorney general, who was not elected, by the way, she actually ran for governor, came in 4th out of 4. But then when Eric Schmidt moved on, she got appointed. So our unelected appointed attorney general, has had a tendency over the last couple of months to just tweet things, just sort of govern by tweet. And she'll say things like she did last week that this law is in effect. Well, and then if you look at the Missouri statutes and everything, nothing has changed. And so you sort of wonder, is the comms person talking to the governance person? What's happening here? But yeah, I mean, if they try to put the law into effect, I expect there'll be a lawsuit, enjoining them from doing that. And the point here is that the signatures should get counted. And once they're verified, people should have the final say. And what's really interesting about everything that they're doing in this state is not that they are trying to justify what they did. What they are trying to do is prevent a vote from happening. A referendum simply means people get to be the final deciders. Well, if you had a good idea that you believe people will support, you have nothing to fear from a referendum. Go out, campaign, as is your right, and say, hey, isn't it great that we manipulate our elections? Go sell that to the Missouri voters. The fact that that is what they fear most tells you they know how bad this is.
Right. It's as clear as day. Excuse me. And we see it. We're seeing it in all the states. I mean, I think we've even seen in Texas where it looks like those maps are going to stay in place, that some of those reps whose districts went from, Republican plus 10 or 11s to Republicans plus 7, they're starting to get nervous because the people in Texas, the same with the people in Missouri, are like, well, wait a minute, we want to decide. This is a representative democracy. We should have the right to do that. And I think this is backfiring on them. And we've seen in other states, like Indiana, for example, they failed because enough Republicans in the Senate said no, one of which was because, frankly, Trump was using horrible, language to describe people with disabilities. And one of them had actually a child with disabilities and voted against it because they were like, I'm not going along with this hostage negotiation. Now, Missouri is clearly choosing a different path, but it seems to me that if I were a couple of representatives that maybe their districts are not, in single digit benefit for Republicans, this is the type of thing that could actually put them in danger. I'm thinking of Fred Wellman, who's running against Wagner, who barely lives in the district and never visits. If I were her and I saw, thousands of my constituents, I'd be really nervous.
Yeah. I mean, I am in fact a constituent of Ann Wagner. It's interesting. The gerrymandering would actually move me out of her district. And, I sort of have the opinion of I've been stuck with this woman as my representative for a long time. And I actually want to have the opportunity to weigh in and cast a vote, about how she has been representing me. I don't want her to, say, well, yeah, I've been doing this job, but now I'm going to shield myself from your accountability. That's not the way democracy works. That's not the way it's supposed to go. And so, you see all these things, and obviously all of that is interconnected and what they're trying to do.
So what is the next step here? Is that if they try to put these maps forward, a lawsuit, or what can people expect here?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they try to put the maps forward, you'll likely see another lawsuit. I mean, functionally, the next steps, as the way this process should work, is the Secretary of State should run a process to count the number of signatures. He will find that there's more than enough signatures to qualify this for the ballot. He should issue a certificate of sufficiency, and then we have an election. The election would be scheduled for November 2026. So it's not going to help, Trump try to manipulate the 2026 elections. But, okay. But if we want to have an election, we can have an election. And that's the normal process. But, we're going to see, litigation and shenanigans and, all of the things that we'll have to cut through to make sure that Missourians' constitutional rights are protected.
So I think you are probably quite accurate that there are going to be some shenanigans for sure. So as my final question on this is, what can people do? Is there something that people can do across the country if they are watching this and they are seeing the work that you are doing in the state to make sure that gerrymander does not go through, or at least goes to the voters? Is there any way that folks can support your efforts right now?
Yeah, so I would always encourage people, visit our website, is just peoplenotpoliticiansmo.org. As things get going, as we get election dates settled and different things, we will have activities, phone banking, different things that people can do. There's a piece up there that you can read on sort of what's happening in the state right now and all of the legal shenanigans that are going on. People should read it. People should frankly tell their friends. I mean, I get that Texas is a big thing. It's 5 seats. California is a big thing. It's 5 seats. But Missouri is a big thing because Missouri is similar to Indiana, where you are actually seeing these quote unquote red states. This is where you're actually going to see the tide turn on these things, and where it might not be expected. So, the easiest thing I can always encourage people to do is donate to us. $25 helps feed volunteers for a shift of door knocking, doing all these things. Like I said, there's an army of over 2,000 of us in Missouri that have been out talking to our neighbors all the time. And so all of that is a huge, huge help. But I also just encourage people to talk about this, campaign and say, hey, do you see this kind of like red state rebellion about what's going on here? Because I don't think it was coincidence that we turned in a bunch of signatures on Tuesday. The map got suspended in Missouri. On Thursday, right before actually we were doing a thank you for all of our volunteers, Indiana rejected the map. Courage is courageous. And when people know the stories about what's happening in states like this, then, I think that can really, continue momentum forward all across.
No, I completely agree. Well, Richard, thank you very much for one, talking to me, but two, doing all this work. I mean, it is so important. And, we talk to a lot of folks in either in very blue states or in very, very red areas where they feel like there's not much that they can do to make a difference. But here's one where if you go to peoplenotpoliticiansmo.com, you can make a real difference with $25, $50, things like that. So I want to make sure .org. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, geez.
peoplenotpoliticiansmo.org.
Oh, I gotta get better at my calling out people's websites. But yes, peoplenotpoliticiansmo.org. Richard, thank you very much. Thank you for all you're doing to protect democracy, both in Missouri and across the United States. And we'll have to have you back on for an update here pretty soon.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.